I have to admit that I'm super emotional, not just to be here with these incredible artists, but also just to see everyone's faces and to be able to connect with you. So it's just great. It's great that you're here. Thank you so much for coming. We are here today to talk about comics and graphic novels, as the slide says. My name is Renee di Cherri. I have worked with Autodesk and also with Adobe in the digital art space. So that's where I come from. And of course, I'm a huge fan of all of these artists up here. I can't introduce them. You probably already know everything they're doing, so I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves to you. And we're doing it alphabetical order by first name. I thought it was the easiest, most monogamous way. I don't know, whatever. So Dustin, you are first.
Hi, my name is Dustin Nguyen.
Woo-woo, Dustin!
Thank you. My background originally before comics, I was in, is this working?
It's working pretty good. You all right?
I came from graphic design and 3D design. I worked with Autodesk for a long time for a lot of HVAC and architectural engineering. And then I made the move to comics back in 2000. And I've just been with DC, Marvel, Image, our books like Batman, No Gotham. And right now I just finished creating Descender, Robin and Batman, and now we're on a book called Little Monsters, Jeff Lemire and I. And I gotta say, I'm probably the most excited person in this room because I'm sitting next to him. Like, come on, man, I don't know why I'm introducing myself. But yeah, that's some of my stuff. That's around that movie finished earlier this year. Yeah, I'm done.
Thank you, Dustin. Next, Mike, we're so glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about what you're excited and what you're working on right now.
Still the Hellboy stuff. I can't seem to move past it.
We're okay with that.
The more we do, the more we see there is to do. I've been mostly just writing the last couple of years, but I'm creeping my way back into drawing the stuff. I've just illustrated an edition of Pinocchio that will be announced soon. And if there's anything else I'm doing, I've already forgotten what it is.
You know what? I forgot to run through his art because I was just enamored by listening to you speak. So I'm sorry.
So I guess that's me.
Yes, that's you. Beautiful Atlantis work. Thank you, Mike. We're so excited to have you. Next up, Jen Bartel.
Hi, I work in comics. I also work on, just in general, a lot of pop culture stuff. I come from an illustration and actually product development background. So I kind of fell ass backwards into comics unintentionally. Back in 2016, I was just at my day job, posting a lot of bad fan art online. And an editor took interest in me and asked me to do some Gem and the Holograms covers at IDW. And that's basically when you turn things in on time, they just keep giving you work. And so for the past several years, that's what I've been doing. And yeah, my client list is kind of weird and eclectic, and it's grown a lot since then. But I mostly do a lot of stuff for Marvel and DC, Disney, all over the place.
Thank you, Jen. And Ryan.
I'm Ryan. My background is mainly in animation, and I guess the reason I'm up here is I'm the baby of the group. I've done one graphic novel that I just released, and it's actually going to be printed via Oni for a second printing, so that's super exciting. But
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, very beautiful. I think and you did this beautiful this beautiful portrait of the master, so thank you so much for that. I didn't ask if I could throw that in there, but I hoped it's okay. What I love about your panels especially is that you can see that visual development in them. Like, they're really beautiful. All right, so Victoria, you are up.
Hi, everyone. Oh, too close. My name is Victoria Ying, and like Ryan, my background's also in animation. I worked at Disney Feature from 2008 until 2016. And I started in comics because I just really wanted to write my own stories. So I both have original graphic novels, City of Secrets and City of Illusion, which is a steampunk middle grade. And I'm also currently working with DC on a Young Wonder Woman project and Marvel on an unannounced thing. And my YA debut is coming out in April, which is a young adult contemporary graphic novel.
Do you sleep? You're very busy.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so I've got this nice little, I just like stuffed a bunch of their art on one screen. Sorry, I did it really quickly this morning. So we're going to talk about comics, and then at the end we'll have some questions. And so I think right now is a weird time with social media and with advancements and technology, and it's strange. I just want to open that up to wherever you'd want to go with it. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? Like, how do you feel? Like, what the heck are we doing with the new advancements that are scary but also exciting? Please, anyone who'd like to speak on what's going on right now.
That's a big question. But,
I know.
When I started in animation, the world of Disney Feature was actually not doing that great. And I think that a lot of us forget that, even with a big name like Disney, we go through ebbs and flows with creativity and success. And, there was times where they rumored that they were going to actually merge Disney Animation with Pixar. And, as time goes on and the longer that I've been in the industry and seeing these ebbs and flows, I know that, the world needs our stories and they need us to continue to make the things that we're making. So even though it's scary right now, don't quit. That's the furthest thing that you should do. You should be making sure that even if the venue that you thought you were going to publish on, who knows, publishing and traditional publishing, maybe they're not going to be as hot on graphic novels in a couple years, but then, new formats are going to come out and new venues for your stories are going to come. So I think that it's really easy to get discouraged right now because there's just so much going on. But as long as there are storytellers, then we need to keep telling stories.
Yeah, a lot of people out there think that this stuff is created by machines, especially when you're talking about animation and computer graphics and that kind of thing. But behind the machines, there's always going to have to be people. I hope.
Yes.
So,
Even the machines that they're making now have to be trained on something.
yes.
So we're starting with AI art.
If you want to go there, you can, but I also felt like Webtoon and, there's some more innocent places.
Yeah. Well, I'm old enough to remember when the ground was moving beneath us, when 3D became a thing, and when photo bashing became a thing. And I remember conceptart.org, people saying that anime art wasn't a thing, and so I remember a lot of different moments in time when new technology was introduced and people were like, ugh. And I think that's just kind of a knee-jerk reaction that artists tend to have because we get set in our ways and, we get accustomed to working with certain methods. But I think the artists that have been able to kind of move forward with technology are the ones that, continue to have opportunities. And the thing that the whole AI or online discourse that seems like it is unending has illustrated most to me is that there's, in my opinion, going to be more of a demand for conceptual thinkers and storytellers and people who bring a level of humanity to their work than ever.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of these people who are excited about AI art, and there's nothing wrong with being excited about it, to be clear, but I think the number one problem that they're going to be facing is learning how to curate and edit their own work, because the easier it becomes to generate images and the less physical effort and labor you have to put into it yourself, the more important the conceptual part becomes. And so I'm actually really excited for like all of the new storytellers that are going to have the ability to, the question that I asked is, how do I train AI to draw like, when a writer gives me a script that asks for a team of superheroes riding bicycles down a spiral staircase, like how do I get a machine to just draw that for me? Because I don't want to, spend like 18 hours doing it myself. So
At least the spiral staircase.
yeah.
I think like selfishly, it doesn't really matter what goes on in the world. Like if you're an artist, just draw. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's just you. Like when pandemic hit, what you do is you just like, powers goes out or like just get a flashlight. So I mean, at the end of the day, it's just like you focus on you, and then I think other things will, when the opportunity comes for you, you will get that chance if you keep working on it. It's like if you're sitting around just worrying about, 10 million problems and how to do this, but it's really hard, you're gonna go crazy. But at the end of the day, just know that if you really like drawing, that's what you want to do. That's all you're gonna do. You're gonna do that, and then when the world opens up and things are ready for you, you've already spent all that time. Like it's like the dude that falls in a cave and has to master kung fu before he resurfaces. So just I think at the end of the day, if you're an artist, you just draw and just do you. Like if you focus on what's going on, and when I was coming up, I was like everyone was doing 3D, everyone was everyone was picking up. Do you remember when Photoshop and Corel Draw was kind of fighting? And everyone was like, oh, you gotta learn that, you gotta learn this. At the end of the day, it's like those tools don't make you you. It's like you're just drawing. I mean, the perfect example is, I don't want to keep going back to Mike.
The old man on the panel
But it's like,
doesn't know anything about any
and it's like
technology.
the perfect example is like he just draws. It doesn't matter what anyone does. It's like no one uses anything. Like he just draws, and it's amazing. And that's all you should focus on.
That's right.
I just wanted to say one thing real quick too. Also, like if we zoom out a little bit and we look at what happened with the proliferation of cameras on our phones, photography became so much easier for everyone to access, right? And then actually, if you go into a bookstore now, you look around, a lot of those covers are no longer photographs, they're all illustration. And why is that? It's because photography became so inexpensive that when you see a photograph on a book cover, you're like, oh, that's cheap.
Yeah.
But like when someone does an illustration, that is a premium product that is expensive, right?
Yeah.
So like we actually shifted back into illustration because photography became so easy. So it's very interesting to think about what's going to happen with AI art once this style of illustration becomes easy and therefore cheap. So like what does premium look like after that? So I think it's interesting to also, I know it's scary right now, but remember to like take a long view of it and look at the context and the content that you guys are making, and yeah, don't be scared. And it's just gonna change. Everything's gonna change, always.
No, she's right. Premium is when there's less of it. So
It's true.
when there's just you, there's less of it.
It's true. I love coalescing that idea because it isn't. I think art should be democratized. Everyone should be able to create whatever images they want without skill. I love that that's able, and you're absolutely right, Jen. It means that the best ideas are going to float to the top, and also that you do have to learn to edit. If images are cheap, you got to know.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem people are going to experience as these things start being more and more implemented into pipelines is people are going to submit 900 images instead of 3, and
Yeah.
that's going to just cause a lot of, I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains initially, but the people who, there will be people who excel at using it as well, and a lot of it is just going to boil down to our own human brains, so.
They'll always need us. Ryan, did you have anything to chat about on this? I just don't want to leave you out.
I concur.
Excellent quote. All right, so maybe a little nitty-gritty of comics. Let's kind of get into it. Comics are such a unique art form, and so are graphic novels. But at the same time, there's so many different ways you can do it, so many different ways to slice it. How do you start out? How do you literally start? Like you've got an idea for something, and you want to make it into a book. Why do I make a comic? Why do I make a whole graphic novel? Do you even know where you're going at the beginning? How does that feel like when you start out on a new project?
Why are you looking at me? I spent 10 years, toiling at Marvel and DC, doing whatever jobs I could get, until I figured out what I wanted to do. So my road involved basically making some kind of career for myself, so that when I did have my own idea, there were people who, least one publisher that said, yeah, with Hellboy, my publisher never asked what it was. He just took a shot at me knowing what I was doing. So, I'm not the guy to ask because I kind of grew up in the business. So I've never been in a position where I pitch a stupid idea. Not stupid. No ideas are stupid. But I've never had to pitch a new idea other than when I did Hellboy. And I'm at the same publisher, so apparently I'm the big fish at that publisher. So then you just go, hey, the Amazing Screw-On Head. And they go, yeah, okay, that sounds terrible, but we'll do that.
I think that's good advice in itself, though. Be in that space already, and then you gain that sort of ability to move forward with what you want to do.
It was certainly the old school way of thinking that again, because I started in '82, and the main game in those days was Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
So the thinking in those days was you get on a monthly book or you do something high profile. And so the audience knows who you are, and then you can do your own thing. The worst advice I got, which was the standard advice in those days, is get on a monthly book and bang out that monthly book. So you're there every month in their face. The trouble is, if you're terrible on a monthly book, you really show the audience that you're one more terrible artist out there. So after you do that for a couple of years, you figure out a way to slow down and put your best work out there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's great.
Just ran through my whole career.
except the terrible stuff.
I
don't think you ever. I think you skipped over that part.
No, I think that part's. I'll be the person on the panel. Every panel gives you this advice, and I'll be the one that say it. You guys know this. There's 3 things that be in comics. You gotta be nice, be good, and be on time. If you can be 2 of those, you can hold a job. And if you can be on time and nice, you're missing out the good part. So that's the part you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, Victoria, when you decided to go forward with your stories, where did that come from? And how did you know you wanted to do a graphic novel or a young adult novel?
Right, so actually I had a very weird, circuitous way into graphic novels. The first thing I want to say to everyone who's an illustrator, expect that your comic art is going to be about half as good as your maximum ability, just because it has to be, and that's like a compromise you're just going to have to make. I can absolutely paint better than every single panel in my book, but it's not going to come together as anything if I spend that long on it. So that's definitely something that I did not expect coming into comics. I was like, oh my God, I know I'm better than this, but every time that I try to do the maximum of my ability, it's like the book will just never get done. So actually, my first book, City of Secrets, I wrote it as a prose novel. I wrote it during NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, coming up in November, which is super fun, and I really encourage everyone to try it out if you guys haven't done it. But yeah, so I wrote it originally as a prose novel, and then when I showed it to all my friends to get feedback, they were like, your story's really cool, I like your characters, but I have no idea what your world looks like because you are so bad at description. And for me, I'm like, oh, I know what it looks like, and the problem is I couldn't use words to tell people what it looked like. So then, I was an illustrator, so I was like, okay, well, what if I just draw it? So then, instead of trying to describe this giant moving city, I could just illustrate it, and then I could be like, it looks like this. And that was the way that the communication really worked, and I pitched my novel as a prose novel to dozens of agents and publishers, and I got no interest. The exact same query letter, the exact same pitch, but with illustration, and to be like, it's a graphic novel, suddenly I just got all this interest. So it wasn't that I intended to do graphic novels, I wanted to write novels, but I ended up doing graphic novels, and I actually really love it, and it's a medium that I just really enjoy, and yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I think there is definitely, as Dustin and Mike mentioned, I think even today, it's pretty common for artists especially to cut their teeth on licensed IP at Marvel, DC, other major publishers, working on even single issues here and there. They threw me into variant covers to test if I could meet a deadline, to test how I was to work with. But then gradually they started throwing me oh, maybe she can do 10 pages. Let's just see how this goes. And so, gradually they start to give you more and more opportunities, and you can you know, if you're someone who doesn't have like, you know, the flexibility to, like, maybe you're just starting out and you're not really, you're kind of relying on the monthly income. It is a good way to get started and to kind of learn the ropes, because they're paying a paycheck for you to draw their characters, and you can learn a lot on the job. But soon after I did my first couple interior jobs, I moved on to my first creator-owned book at Image Comics. And I think the unique thing about comics and publishing within graphic novels in general is that, unlike other forms of storytelling, and like especially within entertainment art, it's something that you can solo if you want to. There's really no other comparable. I think the ceiling might be a little lower in terms of what you can produce by yourself, but you don't have to actually answer to a whole lot of people, and you don't need to rely on a team of 100 people, so you can just kind of get your ideas out there. And there's, you know, a lot of, I think, more today now than even like pre-COVID, because like graphic novel sales have ticked up so much over the past 3 years that like publishers are hungry for this stuff. And if you can create like even just a sample pitch, it's much easier, I think, right now to get your ideas in front of a publisher than it was, like, honestly, even 3 years ago. So I think what makes comics really special is that you can put together like a really small team, or you can even do it yourself. Like, you can have a writer, artist, colorist, or you can even just skip all of that and do it, you know, on your own. And you can get your ideas in front of an audience really quickly. So.
And I know so many filmmakers that are so jealous because they spend 5 years in meetings trying to raise money and blah, 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 and you just go, I'll just go home and draw it.
That's pretty nice.
It's always greener, right? Like you always meet some filmmakers and directors. He's like, man, I just want to do a comic. And then you meet the comic guys, like, man, I want to sell this. And it's always green on either side, you know?
It is a grind, though.
Oh, it is a grind, yeah.
It is a lot of work, and
You
you will
have
be
to be
very tired.
Self-motivated.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody at Disney, when I was first up at Disney, everybody up there wanted to do comics. But they would all say ultimately they can't because they had such a cushy gig where they were. And I gotta say, if I'd rolled out of art school into Disney, I would have been fired by now. But you know, you see where you get used to being part of a big machine. So you have to have that extra thing that says, I got my thing, I need to get out there.
It also depends on you. Like, do you feel like you work in a team better, or you just hate people? It's like,
Yeah.
it's one of those.
One or the other. That's the only choices you get.
Or
Brian,
you like working in video games. So that's.
you come from that other side, the hundreds of people on production. What's it like to make a comic book from that?
So yeah, I was at Disney Animation, and I was, I wanted to tell my own story, but I wasn't, I'll just be honest, I wasn't able or ready to take a pay cut. So I just, nights and weekends, I started, I thumbnailed out an entire book. I didn't write anything, because that's not how my brain works. I just thumbnailed out the entire story, and that's why there's no narration in my book. It's just dialogue. But yeah, 5 years of nights and weekends, and I'm the arbiter of what's good and what's not good, and what makes it in. And I did want to I wanted to prove to myself that, you see these giant teams working on a movie, and you're kind of it loses a singular vision at a certain point, because it's so many different cooks in the kitchen. And ultimately, they come out, animation studios are doing something right, because they're coming out with movies that do well. But I just wanted to see if me as a I don't even know if a thumbnailer / writer and artist could come up with something by myself and have it do well. And I think it's doing well. Second printing will be through Oni Press, coming out in 10 days. So I'm super stoked.
Yeah, come on.
But
Huge graphs.
It's a good point about working within the machine, especially when it's medical insurance and all that stuff. So my advice to people is always, on the weekend, on the side, do something. And instead of trying to do something where you go, oh, this seems to be the hot thing people want, which I guess is fine, but if you're seeing the current trend in hot things, it means that trend's already over.
Yeah.
And my advice, especially to people who already have some kind of a job, and security is on the side, do exactly what you want to do and put it out there. At the worst, you put something out in the world that is you, that's your thing. Maybe nobody buys it, or only a few people buy it, but you don't know if somebody might say, hey, we want that, and then you're stuck doing your dream job.
And we all want to be stuck doing our dream job, don't we?
No, and it can happen.
They're
But if
all
you already
pretty-
have a job that allows you to have, I know like jobs kind of take up your whole day, your whole creative energy, but if you already have a job that's, good on health and, stuff like that, you're in a good position, you know what I mean? You're in a good position because you actually have the flexibility to get paid when you get paid on time.
Well, that's actually a really good position to be in if you're trying to do both or if you're trying to transition. Because for me, I was at a day job as I was kind of transitioning into freelancing. And by having a regular paycheck, it gave me the ability to turn certain things down, which is super important.
Yeah.
And if you are purely just jumping into the deep end with freelancing, you might have to say yes to some stuff that you don't really feel that passionate about and maybe doesn't actually help your career. So I think having like even a part-time job or something that gives you a level of stability as you're working on your comic or as you're trying to get your story figured out, that just gives you a lot more flexibility and control, I think, which is a better place to be.
It's better than being broke, huh?
Yes. We all have to eat. Ryan, did you have something to say?
No, just
Okay.
nodding.
Just checking in on you. I'm sorry. It's going to be like the pick on Ryan panel. I'm sorry. So, stories. Do all stories work as comics, do you guys think? Are all stories appropriate for comics? What kind of ideas get you stuck and you're just like, oh my God, like the spiral staircase and the bikes and, no, it doesn't always work, does it? What happens when it doesn't work?
I mean, my book, the reason I wrote it as a prose novel is because it's a steampunk moving city. And I was like, I don't want to draw that. Like, are you kidding me? And there's like a secret, I don't really want to do a spoiler, but there's two things that have to map on top of each other, a city and something else. And then in order to do that, I was like, oh my God, these things have to match. So instead of just telling you they match, I have to actually make that happen. So that's why I was like, please don't make me draw this. But it turns out, modern tools actually helped. So I was able to use a lot of 3D assets and cobble together, kit bash something that worked. But yeah, like originally I did not want to draw it as a comic just because I knew how challenging the art was going to be. But I ended up finding joy in that too. And for me personally, I love doing comics because there's so much subtlety that you can get through in acting. It's not just words that you try to convey this message to somebody else. You can also do it through these very subtle emotional moments. And those are actually my favorite ones to draw.
And I think any story can be done in comics. It's a different language. You can do mystery, but it's not like you would do it in film. It's not the way you would do it in prose. I know for me, the reason my stuff exploded, the world exploded, is because there were all kinds of stories I came up with, and then I went, shit, I don't know how to draw that. But I know that guy knows how to draw that. Let's see if he wants to draw that. And so I wrote on the back of a lot more talented artists than me.
You heard it here. You gotta find friends who are talented. That's the secret.
Way back when I was drawing the Hulk, which at the time took place in space, where he just fought monsters, and I thought, oh good, I can do this. I can draw monsters, I can draw space. My second issue was all flashbacks of Bruce Banner as a child. And thank God my girlfriend at the time knew how to draw babies. Yes. So she drew half that issue.
It's funny, like sometimes the stories you want to tell involve a lot of things that you don't want to draw. Like horses and trees are the bane of my existence, and there's a lot of them.
Trust me, I came into comics, into Wildstorm, right after the 90s. There's a lot of things you don't want to draw.
But a lot of, when I made up my own stuff, a lot of it was because I lived in fear the 10 years I was working for Marvel and DC, because you get a script and you're at the mercy of that. And if it's Bruce Banner as a child, or the Toronto train system before there was Google Images, it's a nightmare. So I made up a book where that would be made of all the things I wanted to draw and say, if I could get away with this.
Oh, and some comic writers are just so mean. They're just cruel. You can always tell when someone is like kind of new at writing comics and they come from writing prose or some other kind of background because they're not actually thinking like a comic artist. And so it always helps to work with writers who also draw.
Yeah. I think the best part about comics though is like most people eventually go on to do creative artists because you get to create what you want to draw. Especially today we have so many publishers. Marvel and DC is not the only game in town anymore. So and they know that everyone's like coming up with new ideas and everyone's looking for the next. It doesn't have to be what's mainstream. So you get to decide what you want to do, and I think as an artist you create your own job.
And it's exciting, because I see so many guys working in mainstream comics, and I go, well, this guy's fantastic. He can really draw, he can really render the shit out of things, but I have no idea who this guy is. I want to see what that guy does when he's left to his devices. Like, what's inside your head? I want to see that.
Yeah.
Then you find out some guys don't have anything in them.
Oh, that is the worst. It's the worst when that happens. Oh, thank you. Thank you. They're going to make our audio perfect. So maybe a little bit of nitty gritty. Like, how do you draw? How do you draw? Do you use, I know, right? Get up there, we're doing drawing 101. No, but literally, we do have real artists, and I forgot to ask, I'm sorry, I screwed that part up. I was gonna ask y'all, like, who's in the industry. Let's just go away. We'll just pretend like all of you are in the industry, or you're all students, okay? That's what we're sticking to that. But literally, do you use reference? Do you do exercises? Do you do figure drawing? Like, what's your advice for actually really getting down to the nitty gritty and creating art?
Well, I say if you need to draw a tank, you can look up a picture of a tank.
Can I trace it? Is that okay?
Yes.
Don't try to make it up in your own head. You can, which looks really cool. That's why I like drawing fantastical creatures, like kind of like Ryan. We're like, man, I hate drawing horses. But if you tell me to draw a dragon, I'll draw the shit out of a dragon, dude. But I think it's important to draw things that actually work. Sometimes people are like, I don't use references. It's like, no, it's like there's nothing wrong with references. If you're gonna draw a machine and it has to work, do it. There's no shame in that. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's not cheating. There was always that weird thing of people like, well, you're cheating. It's like, no, but I need it to look like this particular thing. So yeah, you use reference.
I will say though, if you want to save time, you draw what you want first, and then look up the reference. Don't go hunting references. You're gonna end up online forever.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm gonna draw a tank, but you don't know what tank you're drawing and what position yet. You're gonna look at every image out there. So decide what you want to draw, and then look up the reference instead of the other way around. You'll save a lot of time.
Yeah, I was always told to know how long something is going to take. So if you know it's going to take you less time to model something in 3D and then sketch over it, do that. If you think it's going to take you less time to just draw it out of your head, like figures, like I can do figures like so fast, then I don't model that. I don't build a mechanic for that. So it all depends on like what you are going to put your value into and what parts of the book that you really want to invest your time into. Because you can't do everything. You have to pick and choose. So.
And yeah, comics is so much work. So you do have to figure out a way to get it done.
Yeah, I think, kind of similar with animation, like economy of line is really important when you're doing sequential art. And I think not like I already mentioned before, not be too precious with each panel because the goal is to utilize all the panels on all the pages to tell a story. So each individual panel doesn't have to carry all that weight by itself like a singular illustration would. It's the cohesive work together. So someone told me that the average time a reader spends looking at a panel is 1 second. So just keep that in mind when you draw your panels. Like someone's gonna look at this for 1 second, and then think about how much time you're putting back to one single panel, and adjust accordingly.
Always so sad. I read right through graphic novels, and I'm like, wait.
And there are some people that just focus on that panel, and then they'll come back like, remember that time you do that panel?
And then they'll post a picture of it on social media, and they'll at you. They'll be like, "Why'd you draw this?" I'm very tired.
I would never live down an illustration for Infinity War, and I know it's not comics, but people still come up to me and when you put Bucky's metal arm on the roster. I should have used better. I should have not flipped my reference.
It was like called comic art fans where collectors post sketches. That's where you see all your shame. And it is forever.
That's why I don't do sketches at shows.
No, that's why I stopped this.
I had a Star Wars book. It was a Wookiee Golden book. I have it on my table. But someone came up to me and they're like, "Oh, so we have this big debate on Star Wars Reddit because you push this specific building from the Wookiee planet in the background, and that means that like the Christmas special is canon because."
See, I feel like this is the number one benefit of like creating your own story is that like if you work on licensed characters, those fans come with so much passion.
Sometimes it gets serious too. I painted a drawing of Ahsoka and the Avatar kids. And I painted and then I posted instantly. They're like, "Why did you paint so light? They're I'm like, dude, I just don't know how to paint. I wasn't using the right colors, but they started coming after like they're racist. I was like, oh god. It was like I had a really bad palette and it didn't go well. And, do you want me to raise the contrast or what? It was and so you can focus on, especially the people will focus on like the really things you don't notice forever sometimes, But Jen is right. When you do a panel, everything should share a page instead of each panel. Because even if you do overload each panel with backgrounds, everything, it's just gonna get weird. Like the fatigue is there, it kills everything else.
And there are painters out there that I won't mention who every panel is every panel is a full-blown painted illustration, and it slows that shit down. You want to do a fight scene, you want to move through it fast. You want to do a gigantic spread that's quiet and slow. Yeah, draw the shit out of that and make it a big spread. But if you have the two guys hit each other with hammers and everything is got a background and it's all rendered, it just kills that.
And to Mike's point, that is such a big part of doing sequential art is controlling the speed and weird, right? So if you're like me, you come from like a singular illustration background, you are not, like that was a foreign concept to me. And learning how to actually like get people to speed up or slow down, and also controlling like page turn reveals. There's a lot of stuff that you just like don't think about when you're just doing singular illustrations, but sequential art is just, it's honestly just a lot of fun because you have so much control over it.
And it's just a different language. That's like, for me, working with like especially new artists and writers, especially, but some you mentioned, novelists, they don't understand how to write a comic. A big reveal of the monster at the bottom of the right-hand page doesn't surprise anybody because nobody reads the comic carefully like this. So that page turn reveal is like the most obvious thing.
Yeah, it was a huge learning curve for me. I kind of absorbed everything I'd seen in comics and was trying to replicate what I'd seen, but things like that, it sounds so simple, but the page reveal didn't dawn on me right away, and so it was a huge learning curve, and I would constantly go back and look at different comics and see how they handle pasting it. And I think if I ever did another project, I would have to pay more attention to that. I think that was my
It is a learning curve. That's one of the best piece of advice I got when I started Hellboy. Frank Miller said to me, no matter what you do, it's gonna suck. Maybe today it's not gonna suck, but you're gonna look back on it and it's gonna suck. But don't redraw every single page 500 times because it's only gonna be so good. It's only gonna be as good as you are today. You just have to keep moving and know that it's gonna get better because you're gonna figure your shit out.
I think the goal is to work fast enough that you don't start hating it as you're working on it.
There's always, I think the thing is, there's always next issue.
Yeah.
There's always next issue.
That's how I kept going.
Yeah.
Because you were doing, oh shit, this is the one that works. No, it didn't. Well, thank God I got another job I start tomorrow.
Yeah.
That will be the one that works.
I do think that is the thing between graphic novels versus single issues. Because when I was working with DC, they wanted me to turn in pages like 5 a week. And that's cool because then someone else can work on top of me. But the downside is, as I draw the characters, I get better at drawing characters. And so then the first pages look very different than later pages. But when you're doing like a graphic novel where you turn in like the whole book at once, I can actually go back and like fix the very early pages.
Well, I know a guy who had this gigantic series he was doing, and he started at the end.
Oh.
Because he wanted to go, and he was his most excited, and he wanted the climax of the book to be the thing that worked. You know, whether he had his energy.
No, I guess. No, and just, I mean, we're all here to like pick up, like, just reference on, we were talking about pacing and everything. The way I learned pacing was a book called Blade and Mortar, which is like my favorite fight book. And reading it, we were talking about how you want the readers to move through the book. Most issues you're just fighting. And you could buy an issue and just read the whole thing in less than 5 minutes sometimes, you know, because it just moves so fast. He just puts background where it's needed, and the action is there. But the thing he focuses on was always like gesture and atmosphere. And an atmosphere doesn't mean you have to create an entire environment. It can be just enough to make it work. And you know, that's just my opinion. Just throwing stuff out there if you want to reference them.
The big thing that I had to learn, and I'm still really bad about it, is like trusting the reader enough to fill in those spaces, because they will. If you're good enough at just indicating certain things, but I'm like one of those chronic doodlers that like wants to draw everything, and it's a problem. But the best, like my favorite comics are the ones that have like really great economy line, they leave a lot of blank space, they let the readers fill that stuff in, because they basically just draw exactly what's necessary to tell the story.
Well, that's why a lot of people say they like my stuff better in black and white, but I'm screwed in black and white because I will establish a scene and establish it with a certain color palette. And then you don't need to do all those backgrounds to remind people where you are. You keep that color palette.
That's smart. I liked what you said, Jen, about story. It reminds me of a Werner Herzog quote, where there's two stories going on. Even he's a filmmaker, a documentarian, who's also in The Mandalorian. He's one of my heroes. Yeah, he wants the better. There's two stories going on whenever you're in a story. There's the story that's on the screen or in the book that you're reading, and then there's the story in your mind. And if you can keep both of those together, you're actually going to, as a creator, you'll have a better output because you're imagining what that person is going to think or say or do after they take your story, after they're done with your story, because it still lives on after that. We have just about 5 minutes before I'm going to start questions. Do you guys have anything you're passionate about that you want to bring up right now? Otherwise, I do have questions, but you're having great answers. I want to open it up.
Just off of that, I do think about that Stephen King quote. And if you guys are interested in learning how to write your own books, On Writing is a really great resource. But one of the things he says is, like, writing books, writing is telepathy. Like, it's time travel, it's telepathy. Like, I'm telling you something and you're seeing it in your head. And I could be telling the story 20 years ago and you're still reading it today. So there's so much power in comics and storytelling that it's magic in so many ways. So I really encourage everyone to, keep thinking about the stories that you want to tell and the things that you want to make.
I just have one thing. This is really good for students who want a little bit of raise up. It's not as good as I wanted it to be. The audience only knows what you're putting on the page. They don't know what was in your head. So don't, the goal is to get what's in your head on the page. You're never going to do it, or you're very rarely going to do it. So the fact that you're aiming for something that good is good enough. Keep moving. Every once in a while you'll be one of those things where you go, holy shit, that's actually better than what I thought it was going to, do. So do that.
And I think if you're in a position where either you're in school and you have assignments or you're at work, and I guess what I wanted to say was, don't try and, if you have a side project, even if you can only work on it like a couple hours a week, do that, and don't put the pressure on trying to like get all your artistic fulfillment if in your day job, if that's not what's doing it for you, right? Like, just go home, get those 3 hours of what you really, really want to do, of the story you want to tell, and then go from there. But yeah, I I spent a couple of years trying to get all my artistic desires out at work, and you're telling other people's stories. And once you tell your own story, that's when you really get that fulfillment.
That was kind of like art school. Like, and I wanted to be the #1 art student, and within a couple months, I was like, okay, I'll do bare minimum at school, and I'll do shit I don't want to need it.
That's so awesome. Is there anything you've been surprised about? Because you're doing comics, right? But there's so many other things around comics. There's promoting it on social media. There's making merch. There's, I don't know, like making videos for your comics to promote it. There's just all these other things on the outside of comics. Has that surprised you, other extra stuff you've had to do that isn't related to comics? You don't do it. I love that. So don't do it, guys.
I think the goal is to get to a place where you're not doing it. Because that other stuff is like, it's fun, kind of, sometimes if you enjoy it, but it does pull you away from the actual thing you're trying to do. And, you know, I think, like, all of that stuff, like, all of the, you know, social media requirements of 2022 and, like, all of the extras, it's just, like, another weight that I think, like, younger artists have to carry in, like, the changing landscape that we talked about at the beginning, where you have to be able to kind of pivot and adjust for, like, today's landscape. But the goal, I think, is always to be able to get to a place where you yourself are not the one doing all of the, like, extra.
Yes.
And some people love doing the extra stuff. Some people love doing the social media stuff. I mean, but way back in the early 90s when guys were self-publishing, a bunch of us said, we don't want to self-publish. We just want to draw and write our comics. I want somebody else to take care of it. Happy to give a publisher part of the money because all I want to do is sit drawing a game.
Yeah. So if you want to draw, focus on drawing. And I think it's also important, I'm just going to offer this, your social media following, it could be important sometimes, but it's not really. Your art is your art, so please don't fret about that, okay? It's not, don't feed the algorithm for the algorithm. You can feed it for yourself if you're happy or if you love your fans.
The fastest way to burn out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is, like, comics will burn you out.
Yeah.
So, like, that's just two areas of burnout that
Yeah.
you just, if you're gonna burn out on anything, like, make it something actually worthwhile.
And to be clear, the tech companies are using you.
Yeah.
They're using you to sell ads. So don't play with that, okay?
I mean, I think about Alex Astor, which I don't know if you guys know this, but she's a book talk person where she pitched her book on Book Talk and then got picked up by a publisher, movie deal, all the jazz. And she talks about TikTok and she says she spends every 5 hours a day on TikTok to make content. She spends more time on TikTok than writing. And I saw that and I'm like, I can't do that. I can't. Like, that's
a prison.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to take some questions now, so if you've got a question, please raise your hand. I know everybody does. I will try to get to everybody and go all the way. I'm truly going to go all the way in the back of the room so that we can make sure that nobody feels left out. This should be working. It's not working very well, right? Or is it working? Okay, great. Lovely. Yeah, it's not really working. It's this guy. Here, you know what? I'm literally just going to hand you this phone here.
You're just talking to that loud. Hi, is this where you also closer from her? Hi, I'm Mackenzie. I'm a huge Hellboy fan, Blackbird fan. Oh my gosh. I was wondering, so I just graduated in the beginning of COVID and kind of trying to get my sort of start in comic industry. I was wondering for these, first jobs, like the interiors for studios and that kind of thing, how do these studios kind of go about finding their kind of entry-level talent? I know, I think some populations of editors kind of came to you. Can you talk a little bit more on that process and how it kind of goes down?
So I started at DC Comics 2018, and what happened was I actually met my editor at a bar, and she was like, oh, we're DC. I'm like, oh, cool, I do comics. And she's like, anything I've heard of? And I'm like, well, no, because I don't have anything published. But I did have samples. I had comics samples, not just illustration, but comics. And so I was able to have that chance meeting and then send her an email, like, here's my samples. And then she called me the next week to be like, do you want to do Wonder Woman? So that, opportunity or luck is opportunity needing preparedness. So you have to have those samples ready for when that moment comes and someone is like, oh, do you have anything to show? Because that way they actually know that you can do comics and not just illustration.
Yeah, and I know it's kind of cliche at this point, but like fan art got me hired. So if you want to work for a specific company or if you want to get hired to draw specific characters, make fan art of those characters and make it look as professional as possible and like really show that you can draw these characters in a way that could get you hired. And also, just as an aside, there's so many artists who claim to want to do interior work with 0 interior samples. It's very bizarre. I've never understood it.
Yeah, I'm old, so I just use Facebook. And most of the artists we use, I found on Facebook. And a lot of them because I saw the way they drew one of my characters. But it doesn't have to be my character. I'm always looking for artists I really like, especially because our range of books is so broad now. I can use almost anybody if I like their work. So, but I, I made a mistake a few times of hiring somebody to do something based on a couple images, and then you realize, oh, that's right, not everybody can draw comics. So yeah, so being able to back up the pretty picture with some page samples is.
Are there events you would suggest that you guys could work at, like for comics at all? Like, or is it mostly sort of just networking, like you described?
I mean, San Diego Comic Con.
Do you get work at San Diego Comics? I just get dizzy and
Yeah, I find it's really tough to look at people's portfolios.
Yeah.
But it's and plus I'll never do it.
Yeah, that's
So.
true. You and me both, actually. So I've got another question here.
Hi, I'm oh, that's really loud. Hi, I'm Owen, right here. My book's in my lap. So how much do you balance plotting a story beforehand and seeing where it goes as you're drawing it? Like, where do you find that balance?
I mean, I just thumbnail out my whole book and kind of like cut to that. Like I work very visually, and so like yeah, I just kind of like visually told the story, and I did it all in like these little thumbnails, and then I would take a picture on my phone, create a new album, and I would just scroll through the whole thing. If it were any like these crappy little thumbnails, then I was good to go forward. But and I made it a point not to move any further past the thumbnail stage unless they worked, because I did it like once or twice where I got in trouble where I was like, I'll have to just fudge this panel and the composition of the panel, and then came back to my game with the rest of the full page.
A lot of people think thumbnails is something they tell you to do when you're in art school, but no, do them. I know for me when I start a story, it's very easy to come up with the beginning, but I usually have to then come up with the ending, and then the middle is the fun part. And a lot of my stuff, the story just happens when I thumbnail it, but I do need to know where I'm going to end up.
Yeah, like I seriously won't even attempt drawing until I'm done with my thumbnails, even if they make sense to anyone else. Like sometimes you draw, it's a storytelling tool for yourself. The way I do it is I go through a script, I thumbnail the entire thing, and then I move on to putting it on page. I still draw on paper, so put it on page, and even those are just giant thumbnails at that point. And then I won't even start going back to refine anything until I flip through the entire book and say, okay, this reads okay. Because once you start drawing, you don't. It's easier. It's like a production line for myself to do it like that.
I even do thumbnails when I'm writing for somebody else.
Yeah.
I do thumbnails, but I've learned not to give the artist the thumbnails because I don't want to tell them how I would do it. But I do the thumbnails because that's the way I think, and I need to know it's possible to do all I'm asking them to do on one page.
This is what I meant earlier when I said
Yeah.
it's nice to work with writers who are also artists, because there's a lot of writers who don't do that.
Yeah.
And they give you impossible panel descriptions.
Yeah, my process is a little different because I come from prose writing, I guess. So I usually write an entire outline and I kind of have a goal, but my outline is maybe 1 page, 500 words, and then I actually draft the entire thing in a script. And the reason I do that is because I actually think better when I can move things around more easily, so like whole chapters or like pages and moments, I want to be able to have as much flexibility as possible. So I do a full script and then make sure that that is like as good as it can be before I move into thumbnails. Thumbnailing is still super important, like vital, but for me, like I like to have everything in writing first. And that's also helpful because if you're working with an editor, they can actually read a script and help you at that stage instead of like once you've already gotten into the drawings.
That's awesome. I've got another
My
question.
goal is actually one day I'll be so big I can sell my thumbnails.
I like that.
Probably could.
Incomprehensible.
You're okay. Go ahead down.
Hi, my name's Melanie. I had a question because I'm kind of doing the flip of what you guys have done, where I'm currently at Webtoon and we have a lot of freedom and I have a lot of control, but I know that I might end up in an environment where I'm working with a team. So do you have any advice on kind of going between your own projects versus working with a company where you have to be more involved with other people and there's more of a pipeline? Yeah, like jumping between those two types of work environments.
Yeah, it's very difficult going from basically like being able to do every stage yourself or working very closely with people who get your process to having to like make some line art that's going to be sent to a colorist and you don't necessarily know who that colorist is or what they're going to do with it. I am stubborn, and so I insist on just coloring my own stuff at this point. But there are a couple colorists that I'll work with, and that's, I think, honestly, you just have to, if you do transition to working in more of that pipeline model, I think first and foremost, you have to manage your expectations, and you might not be totally happy with what you get back, and you kind of just have to keep moving forward. And I know that sounds disappointing, but so much of it is just like learning how to accept it and move forward.
And I think the important thing is to continue doing your own thing on the side just so you don't go crazy. That's always a good goal.
Ryan said that earlier. It's so true. I got another question here.
Hi, my name is Adam, and thank you so much for this talk. It was really awesome. I'll try not to take too much time away from other questions, but you guys are huge inspirations, and I feel like you've given so much, and I was just wondering if I could give you a copy of the comic I'm working on.
Aw, that's
Is that okay
sweet.
if I just came up and gave it to you?
You can do that after, okay?
Okay.
But yes, of
But,
course.
Yeah, thank you so much for this talk. It was really cool.
So
Thanks for coming.
sweet. Thank you, Ryan. So awesome. Are you going to?
Hi, my name's Momo. Been following quite a few of you. May have seen you, sorry. So I am in a point where I have a lot of stories that I want to tell. Like I'm getting better at formulating ideas from my experiences with my voice. And you guys have already had probably a plethora of them in your careers and in your lifetime. Do you have a method in which to determine what stories get more attention from you? How do you take your stories and say, this has more potential than the other one, even though you're connected to them, because they are your story and your experience?
I think for me, especially with my next book, Hungry Ghost, which is about growing up Asian American and like dealing with an eating disorder and having like the cultural expectation around you that is very different than the current one that we live in. That story, when I wrote it, felt like it had to come out. Like I couldn't ignore it. Like there was something just about that had that thrust that someone once said that the muse will come to you with an idea, and if you choose not to take her and take that inspiration, she'll go to someone else. So that's why, like, maybe you'll see 5 years from now, you'll be like, oh, I had that idea. It's because, like, the muse probably left you because you decided not to do anything with it. So when you feel that inspiration, you feel that drive, just, like, pursue it relentlessly until it's done. And then at that point, I think you can evaluate a little bit better once you see the whole picture.
I know for me, I'm always banging half a dozen story ideas around, but most of them aren't done. So everything you take in, everything you see goes back into this machine where the little man is trying to fit the pieces together, and every once in a while one of the little men back there says, we got one, and then you do that.
That's a good answer. I've got another question right here.
Hi. What sort of questions do you ask yourself as you're like working through your process and sort of like actually here's the real question I have to ask is when you start a story, like I remember hearing, at least like reading online, like Mike, for your story for Hellboy, it was like you asked, like, what if there was a Catholic demon or along that lines? Like, how do you figure out what your story is about from like a weird premise? You know, like when you're like making it, like what's sort of the thing that you discover as you know, like what's the weirdest part of that process? You know, like just that. I'm sorry, I'm like.
No, you're doing great.
I don't. I'm not exactly sure what the question is.
But I guess the question is, how do you discover what the thing you're writing is about? Like figuring out like the actual thing you want to say.
For me, it's always just a pile of stuff I want to draw, and
I love that.
like I had no idea who any of these characters were or where things were going when I started. I just wanted to put a book out there that looked and felt like the stuff I cared about. But it was, you know, I'm an artist first and foremost. I still have a really hard time, like you, calling myself a writer, even though I've been doing it for a really long time now. So I wanted something as an artist that kind of looked like what the shit inside of my head looked like. And nobody was ever going to give me that script at Marvel or DC. So I wrote things really vague. And there were vague prophecies that just were like, oh, it'd be cool if this happened, or this guy says this. I don't know what the fuck that means, but maybe I'll figure it out someday. Hellboy became the Beast of the Apocalypse because I thumbnailed a fight scene, and I drew the fight scene, but I didn't write the fight scene. And in the fight scene, I can't write Spider-Man like, ooh, look, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. It was like two characters talking to each other while they were fighting, but I had no fucking idea what they were talking about. So Hellboy became the Beast of the Apocalypse because this other character said, "You're the Beast of the Apocalypse," and I was like, "Holy shit! Well, okay, I got nothing else," and that's how that happened.
Sounds like you back into it. We don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to try to take 2 more questions. We've got one right here. I know.
Hi, I was wondering what kind of routines do y'all have to like both produce your works, but also to improve yourselves and practice?
So my books, they're so long, they're usually like 200 pages. So I usually do something called time math, where I divide that up based on how long I know everything takes me. So I know I can do the entire book thumbnailed in about 8 weeks. So I schedule that into my time, and then I know that I can do 2 pages of inks a day. So then that I just make sure that all the time is mathed out. So then I give myself exactly the amount of time I need, but also I make sure to give myself weekends. So I don't overschedule myself. Everyone protect your weekends.
How does she do it? And she looks good when she does it, too. I don't know if you've seen her on Twitter. They're always dressed to the nines.
Oh, thank you.
All right, here's our last question.
Hi. On the usual topic of dialogue, how do you usually approach it?
Dialogue. What's your approach?
I'm like you. My main goal in comics was not to embarrass myself, and I knew I wasn't a writer, but I knew I could write dialogue because I know what people say. So I said, I'm not writing any kind of big, flowery captions because I will just look dumb. So it's how people talk. Hellboy talks the way I talk, and when Hellboy had a female partner, it was, here's what I would say, what would my wife say? And then little by little, I modeled it on what would it sound like if this actor was this character. And I stuck to dialogue. And, you know, some people, they write dialogue where you go, did you just learn in comics how to write dialogue? Because it doesn't sound anything like the way people talk. And I like to write like people talk.
I think there's kind of like a good set of goals to have is number one, to make them sound like real existing human beings, to make them believable as characters, but also to approach dialogue in the same way that you would approach that economy of line that I was talking about. Because you always can tell when there's someone who's like very focused on the dialogue and it takes up like 2/3 of the panel. And you're like, oh, there's no room for the art, which is the whole point of this. So yeah, I think being economical about dialogue is also really important in graphic novels and comics.
Yeah, it's excellent. Well, we are at time. I hope you enjoyed this. I had a wonderful time. Let's give it up.